Well, welcome. It is good to be together, and we are here to bring you some equipping, specifically to hear the testimony of one of my friends and how the ministry of Celebrate Recovery has really impacted her life. So I hope you're excited. I know that I am, and thankful to be with you right now. And so, friend, so glad to be together. Why don't you introduce who you are?
My name is Melissa. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus, and I'm in recovery for chemical addiction and codependency.
And Melissa, thank you so much for being willing and open to share your story
Thanks
with
for
us
inviting
right now.
me.
Oh, absolutely. So thankful to hear about your story. So help us to know a little bit about who you are. Share your story with us.
Okay, well, I'm an adult child of dysfunction. Was raised by a single mom. My parents were married, but they divorced when I was 2, and my dad had other children with other women, and I would frequently visit his families, but I would live mainly with my mom. She was really struggling to raise me on her own, so we had different men live with us at different times. So I was always a stepchild or a step niece or step, never fully a family member of the families that we were interacting with at the time. So very early on, I always felt very different, like something was wrong with me, especially because I had really bright orange hair when I was little, and it was always a topic of discussion when people would meet me, like, whoa, your hair color, it's so bright. Never it's beautiful or it's unique. It's always it's bright, it's standing out. And so I always just had this inner shame that there was just always something wrong with me. When people would interact with me, it was always something about how I looked. And we moved around a lot because my mom had would get different jobs, or we would live with somebody. And so I was always in a different school. And so I was always a new kid trying to fit in. So just very early on, I had just deep insecurities of just never belonging to a community or to really anywhere, friendship wise, family wise. So I kind of always just felt very isolated and alone. And as I grew up, like I said, we moved around a lot. There were times that I would live with my dad, and my dad's an alcoholic, still an active alcoholic. I don't have a relationship with him, never really have had. So when I would stay with him, it was a party environment. And so I didn't have any discipline there. And as I've worked through my recovery, I realized that I would start to do silly, crazy things when I would be around my dad. I would act out. I would act like the adults were acting, just silly, loud, And I realize now it's because I really wanted my dad to parent me, but he was unable to do so because he was under the influence and just drinking and all of those things. And so I would go back and forth, and there was just a different dynamic in each home. So again, I never felt like I fit in anywhere. And then my teen years is when I started getting into trouble. I actually didn't really get into any breaking laws, but I was doing naughty things, drinking, doing drugs really early on, lying, stealing money, not coming home when I said I would come home. But really, I didn't get into too much trouble. But looking back now on that time, I just remember thinking that was the way that I fit in, was when I would partake in drinking and drug use with the other peers that were doing that with me. And it was the first time I felt like I actually belonged to a group of people and they accepted me. But of course, it's because I couldn't feel my feelings. So even if they didn't accept me, I wouldn't have known that. And so I got married really young. I had a child really young. I had very difficult pregnancies, which I developed some depression and anxiety. And so that, with all of the trauma from my childhood, was overwhelming. And so I was medicated. And through that, I ended up developing a drug addiction to medication. And I struggled with that for about 6 years. I met the Lord when I was 19, but I didn't surrender to him until 2016, which is really, that's the hardest part of my story, because I was so needing the Lord's healing power, but I didn't know how to receive it because the pain inside of me was so huge that the only thing that I thought I could do was to numb it enough to have enough room in my mind to possibly accept a solution. And that was a cycle that I participated in for a very long time, which was devastating. So in 2016, I was scrolling through Facebook, and I had been praying that whole time. I knew that God could deliver me. I knew that he could, but I didn't know what that would look like. So I would just pray that every day. Like, this is what I'm involved in is really bad, and I need your help. Even though I don't really know you, I need your help. And so in 2016, I was scrolling through Facebook in the middle of the night, and there was a post, somebody had shared a chip of a sobriety chip. And I was like, oh my gosh, I think I need that. And I contacted this person, and they said, I received this at a treatment facility up in Tuolumne County, and here's the phone number. And I called them 8 o'clock in the morning, and I got a bed, and I checked myself in. And the most amazing part of that is that you're assigned counselors when you go up there, and there's a lot of counselors. And I got all of the Christian counselors that were employed there. They weren't outwardly, like, I didn't ask for them. That's just how it worked out. And when we would have our one-on-one sessions, they would say, okay, so now that we're done, can I pray for you? And I'll be like, yeah, you can pray for me. Please pray for me. And one of them would quietly tell me about Celebrate Recovery. And he'd say, you really need to go to Celebrate. I'm like, what is it? Please tell me what it is. What is that place? And he said, just go. I promise you, just go. And so my first Tuesday home, I came to Celebrate Recovery, and I was like, they're like worshiping, but they're talking about drug addiction. This is so weird. So I kept coming back. I was like, wow, you guys can talk about that stuff here?
Wow.
And that was the first time in my life that I believed that all those prayers and all those years of all that suffering and crying out to God and trying to get to know him and trying to make sense of the pain and my identity and why I was trying to numb, it all made sense. And immediately the obsession was lifted. I never thought about drugs and alcohol ever again. I just thought about Jesus and what he could do in my life. And I hit the ground running. I got into a step study right away. I got a sponsor right away. I started working the steps, and I gave it my all. I gave it everything I had. I stopped going to secular recovery. I knew I needed the 12 steps, and that was vital to walk me through why I became an addict, but I needed Jesus more. And that's what Celebrate Recovery is we're pointed right to Jesus, to his healing power and to who he is. And that's what I needed. I needed to reconcile everything that I felt to my creator. Like, it needed to make sense to me. And through that relationship, it's made sense to me. I identify with so many stories in the Bible. My favorite was the story of Joseph. I read it over and over and over again in the beginning, because it's like all that suffering for him to come out on the other side and just make such a godly decision in his life. And it's like, that's the character that I want to be. I want to go through all of this, but in the end, I want to glorify the Lord. And so that's what I did. And I just kept coming back, and I've never left.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing. What would you tell a person who's now just heard a piece of your story and some of the things that you've experienced, and they're wondering, is Celebrate Recovery a place that's going to welcome me? Is Celebrate Recovery is even a place that's meant for someone like me?
Yeah.
What would you say to that person?
Well, first I would ask them why they're even wondering about Celebrate Recovery. And what's the problem here? And I would encourage them that there's no shame. There's no shame in this place. That it's going to be hard at first, but when you get into that first step study and you start reading the questions in a group of women who are similar to you, and that healing starts to happen and that community is built, and you can come to somebody and say, listen, I love the Lord, but I have this thing, and I can't stop looking at inappropriate things on the internet, or I can't stay sober, or I don't get along with my spouse, I think I want a divorce, or I can't forgive my parents or my offender or my abuser or whatever. And it's like, yeah, we've all been there. We've been to that first step, but we all have a story, and God redeemed it. So keep coming back and don't give up. And I think probably one of the biggest things is, what could it hurt?
Yeah.
What can the 12 steps hurt? Are you going to end up worse than you were? No, you won't. So just try. Just try it. And I think that that's probably the hardest answer to give you for that question, but that's the honest one. Just give it a try.
Yeah.
See what the Lord does.
Yeah. I appreciate how you shared that the 12 steps are so important, but what you truly need is the healing power of Jesus. And God has used Celebrate Recovery in an incredible way. It reminds me of this verse in Ephesians 2, but God, being rich in mercy because of the great love with which he has loved us, even while we were dead in our trespasses, he made us alive together with Christ. By grace you've been saved. And that's what we need. We need the grace of God. We need the healing power of the grace of God to rescue us from spiritual death, and that we might have life in Jesus Christ. Yeah. What's anything else that you'd want to share with somebody? They've heard your story here. They've heard your encouragement. And is there anything you'd want to?
Yeah, don't be afraid of confronting your pain, because everybody has something. Everybody has something that keeps them from the fullness of God. Don't be afraid of it, because you don't know what the Lord will do with it. I was so afraid of my pain for so long. I didn't want to verbalize the things that I thought about myself, the things that I felt in my inner dialogue. I was so ashamed that people would just run away from me or believe it or confirm it. And when I came into the rooms and I would share in group and people would embrace me and love me and say, "Oh, I've been there, sister, like keep coming back, it gets better." And then all of a sudden on a Tuesday night, I'm standing there sharing my testimony. It's like all those little moments of just trusting the Lord and just confessing and giving him all of those things produce this life. And I can't believe it. I really can't. So that's what I would say. Just give it to the Lord and don't be afraid. Don't live in that shame.
God can do more than we think.
He can. And he does.
And he does.
Yeah.
And he does.
Yeah.
And your life is an incredible testimony.
It is.
Of how God has done more than you could think or imagine.
Yeah.
You know, as you shared your story, it reminds me of the encouragement in Scripture about how God has called us his child.
Yeah.
And that we are the beloved children of God.
Yeah.
And that in Christ, we find that we have a Father who loves us and we're wanted.
Yeah.
And we're special and loved and created for really the good things that God has for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Thanks for being willing to be open and transparent. And I believe what you've shared is going to be an incredible encouragement to everyone who has watched.
Thank you.
Yeah. And for those of you who have been watching with us, we just want to encourage you. If you've made it this far in hearing Melissa's testimony, then we want to encourage you to try out Celebrate Recovery. And one of the great sayings at Celebrate Recovery is no one shows up on a winning streak, and you might be losing big time right now. And it's a safe place to come lose. It's a safe place to come lose and to be somebody who is not in a great spot, and to find community and hope in Jesus Christ, and to find a community of people who will welcome you in. And so we want to encourage you to try it out. And so we're going to continue to encourage you, continue to equip you. But Melissa, I just want to say thanks. Thanks for being willing to share your story. It's been a great blessing to me, and it's a great blessing to all of us as we've enjoyed it together.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. And we'll continue to bring resources. And so we look forward to being with you again soon.